Zoning Minister of Albemarle County, I call the meeting of February 4th, 2025 to order. First, would like to establish a quorum. Ask that each of you present state your name and that you are present or with an I. Mr. Burkhart,
Kurt Burkhardt, present.
Mr. Shepherd,
Aye.
Ms. Joseph,
Marcia Joseph, here I am.
Mr. Rosenberg,
Ronald Rosenberg, present.
Mr. Carrington,
Bo Carrington, present.
My name is John Shepherd.
also with us today is the zoning administrator, Bart Svoboda, James Bowling, the BZA's attorney, our newly appointed county attorney, Andy Herrick, Marcia Alley, and Lisa Green, our code compliance manager, and some various other staff. So our first order here is to elect the officers for the BZA. So the first step is for nominations. So could we have a nomination for the chair?
Well, what I'd like to do is like to propose to the board is that we continue the slate of officers that we had for last year. And that would be Mr. Carrington as our chair, Mr. Burkhart as vice chair, and Mr. Shepherd as secretary. I'd like to make that motion, please.
We have that motion. We have a second.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Ms. Alley, would you call the roll?
Mr. Burkhart,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenberg,
Aye.
Ms. Joseph,
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd,
Aye.
Mr. Carrington.
Aye.
The floor is yours, Mr. Carrington.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. So rather than moving to our next agenda item, which is the review and readoption of rules of procedure, because Mr. Rosenberg, I know, has a short timeline today, I'd like to go ahead and ask the board to consider a modification of our agenda to hear the variance request first. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, got a motion and a second to amend the agenda for today's meeting to put the variance as our next agenda item. Ms. Alley, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Shepherd,
Aye.
Mr. Burkhart,
Aye.
Ms. Joseph,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenberg,
Aye.
Mr. Carrington.
Aye. All right, we can move to our first public hearing of the day, first and only. It's a VA 2024-03, 654 Clark's Tract lot size reduction, Mr. Andrew Lynn. And we're going to start with the staff and county presentation. There's a 15-minute total time. That does not include any board questions. And then the appellant can take a 15-minute time to present to the board as well.
Thank you, Chair Carrington. Again, Francis McCall, Deputy Zoning Administrator. This is variance 2024-03, 654 Clark's Tract. The proposed variance application is to reduce the lot size below the 2-acre minimum for the rural areas zoning district. Quick outline of what we'll go over today, some vicinity and zoning site characteristics, the specifics to the request, an overview of the variance criteria, staff's recommendation, and then when you are ready, there will be motions available for you. So the vicinity and zoning, the property is located in the eastern portion of the county between Keswick and Sismond, and about 1.4 miles from the intersection of Clark's Tract, Route 648, and Louisa Road, Route 22, and again is zoned RA rural areas. Here's an aerial view of the subject property. It's outlined in red there. That's the length of the property. You'll notice here in a few other slides that this will be a popular slide going through the presentation. So the particular site characteristics here, we see the overall topography of the area and the property itself. Stream buffer is in the light purple, and the 100-year floodplain is in the darker purple. A portion of each is at the rear of the property. It's not really the portion that we are discussing, which you'll see here in a moment. So another quick look at, just to kind of orient yourselves of what that looks like without anything on the slide. So again, these orientations on this particular request, I'm going to be showing multiple surveys like the one you see here throughout that will be at different orientations. Then I'll kind of explain on this particular one, the orientation to the north is basically to the top left. This next property is the north is to the right. It's just had to do with how these images could be put into these slides. So if you need some reorientation, I'm here to help you. And again, one more time, the kind of the bare aerial of that property. And this is the blank one on this one. And again, it just kind of gives you that orientation. So here you go. Here the applicant is requesting a variance from the rural area minimum lot size to reduce the lot from 7.01 acres to 1.3867 acres, a variance of 0.6133 acres. And what they are proposing here is that reduction, and then the remainder, as it's shown there, would be added to their adjacent lot that is also under the same ownership. So here's that orientation here with the 1.3 acres represented. And the next slide is going to show that next long lot with how the 2 acres is represented. The 2 acres being obviously larger than that 1.3. So here's that 2 acres represented again on that, how that is overlaid with that aerial photo. And here's a combination that you'll see where the 2 acres and the 1.38 acres kind of relate to each other, how that fits in. Again, here's that overlay of the actual aerial. The lighter blue is that the 2 acre max, and then the 1.38. This again is just the same representation, but on the other plat that was presented to in the packet. Just kind of go through this. You can tell me to slow down if you'd like. The 2 acres again, and that aerial, and again with the overlay. So the next is granting the variance. Now this is to the specifics of granting the variance. We've been here multiple times, and I believe you're pretty familiar with this graphic as far as how we basically evaluate that, and then that's also for your evaluation as well. Please remember that all the criteria must be met to grant a variance. So in this particular case, and this is outlined in the staff report, the request does not meet all of those criteria. So this then leads to our recommendation, which is again in the staff report.
Could you go back to the previous slide?
Yes, sir.
Just for a moment. Thank you. Thank you.
That actually was my next slide to the recommendation, was essentially the same one, just knowing that we want to see that again. So as noted, it does not meet all of those particular criteria. So that's where staff's recommendation, as it being that it has not met the burden of proof by a preponderance of the evidence that the application meets the standards for a variance, it's recommended for denial. And I'm here for any questions. as is our county attorney, if you so need to ask any particular clarifying questions from him.
Thank you, Mr. McCall. Any questions from the board for Mr. McCall? Or Mr. Herrick, for that matter?
I have some questions. Mr. McCall, just to elucidate the issue, the 2-acre minimum in this zoning category is part of this zoning category. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's the minimum
minimum
area for a lot in the rural area.
Okay, in the rural zone. Okay, in the rural area. What zoning category is this? I didn't.
It's rural areas, the
Rural
RA.
area,
Mhm.
Okay, okay. You know, maybe you weren't around when the ordinance was drafted, and perhaps Mr. Herrick can chime in on this. What was the rationale for 2 acres in that minimum size?
It definitely wasn't around when in 1980 when the ordinance was adopted, but I believe that minimum acreage was carried over from some of the earlier, the 69 ordinance, 74, somewhere in that range. I don't know the exact history, but minimum 2 acres has been a minimum lot size for a considerable amount of time.
December 10th, 1980.
That's the current ordinance, the date it was adopted, correct?
However,
that-
that's when it was, it's
That was
been
very-
around for
very
a
good
very
day.
long time.
Very good day. Okay. So the 2-acre minimum has been around for 40 some odd years
Correct.
in the zoning ordinance from what I'm hearing.
It's been around longer than that.
Well, okay, but I think my principal point is that it's not a new requirement, and I'm just trying to dig into what the magic of the number is. And if no one can remember, because no one was there when the number was arrived at, could you give some idea of what you think the justification for 2 acres as opposed to 1 acre, as opposed to any other size?
I really, I don't think I could, as far as what the actual rationale back in the 70s and 80s was.
Okay.
It's actually late 70s when this was actually
Right.
adopted, you know. and-
So, you know, usually when we have an area requirement, one second, I think that there's some justification based on density or proximity of structures next to each other or something, some rationale like that.
Theoretically, yes. I mean, the county is, in the rural area is very large, so evaluating that over that space, I don't know if that was done in the late 70s.
Okay, I'll cede my time to my friend over here, but I just wanted to establish, so it's a longstanding requirement of 2 acres. Unclear what the rationale was because no one was around when it was adopted. But it's just what has been a consistent requirement of that rural zone. And that's what you're telling me.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't know if this is discussion or what. I've reread the minutes from that meeting. I could go way into the rationale for this. It was an incredible undertaking by the county to make a grand bargain to preserve the rural areas and to encourage development in the growth areas. Before this happened, the county was allowed to be subdivided into sprawling, large subdivisions. And this rezoning, December 10th, 1980, stopped that. It was an amazing thing.
So the rationale was to deter higher density residential development in the
Yes.
rural zone. And
Yes.
I think the
Yep.
concurrence. Okay, well, that's that at least explains what they were thinking about at the time. Let me ask you this question. Has the development of the rural area in this area, and I couldn't tell from the pictures you were showing, has it developed that way with no subdivisions of greater density than 2-acre minimums, or has the ordinance been carried out exactly as it was designed in 1980? What,
The general area wasn't analyzed, but
right,
general pictures of that area, it's if somebody were to propose to subdivide, 2 acres would be the minimum that they would,
but
there,
is that-
there were a lot of smaller pre-existing lots that you do see on the map.
Okay, okay. The reason for my question is whether or not the rationale was carried out in reality in terms of the density, requiring larger density so that there wouldn't be high density subdivisions. And you're saying there are just a few houses on these 2-acre parcels, or
Again, the rural area is very large, so trying to analyze that
In this
particular
thing,
aspect,
let
my
that-
experience
yeah.
with the subdivision history that I've been exposed to and been part of has done exactly that. I'm not aware that we are approving smaller lots. They get there, I think that one of the attachments was just a description on the development rights, and that's how we basically implement that through that regulation with the development rights, those
Right.
smaller lots, limiting them to the 5. And then
okay.
Have
Other
there
questions?
ever been, do you know of any lot ever that's been created with less than 2 acres in the rural areas since December 10th, 1980?
been created through standard subdivision regulations? No. There may be other variances that had been granted, but I did not do that research to know all of the history of Albemarle County when it came to variances for minimum lot size reductions.
So from 1994 to to 2009, never happened. I know that from,
Yeah, and I'm not aware that of my time approving subdivisions in the rural areas, that also has never happened.
Prior to 1980, with the adoption of the current zoning ordinance, you had a good number of subdivisions that were platted that were going to be in contrary to the new ordinance, which is 5 2-acre lots as a matter of right, and then as many 21-acre lots as you could get. Prior to 1980, you had an old zoning ordinance which had been adopted over the years, starting way back from the first adoption, going up to 1980. And as a result, you had a hodgepodge of development plats that had been filed here, there, and everywhere to take advantage of the old zoning ordinance. For example, there was a large subdivision that had been platted adjacent to the Rivanna Reservoir, multiple number of small lots and so forth and so on. And so you had, as Francis has already said, you had lots of all varying sizes throughout the rural area in Albemarle County, some much smaller than 2 acres. I think you had one recently with Camp Albemarle, I believe comes to mind, that came before you, Lake Albemarle.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
You
Right.
saw an example of it.
I would not disagree with anything Mr. Bowling has
Okay.
stated.
Yeah, I just want to, I don't want to get bogged down in the intention of the old code, and I want to refocus our board on the strict criteria in front of us. So any more questions for staff?
I just have one question. With the growing demand for housing in the area, not just here, but everywhere, what concerns, and I'd like to really hear this because the history Mr. Shepherd shared from 1994 to 2009 was certainly of interest. But what signals should, I mean, you have indicated in your staff report that you don't want to grant, or the variance should not be granted. What if this board were to vote against that determination and grant that? What kind of signals would that give, do you think, coming from the zoning office as far as outside interest wanting to come in and, take a look at this? I mean, I know that precedents can't be set because every variance is different, but I was wondering if you could address that.
Yeah, I don't want to speculate kind of on future things. I will let you know that Bart Swoboda, zoning administrator, deputy director, community development, that during the comp plan discussions, which are going on right now, AC 44, there is not a discussion of lowering lot sizes or doing those things within the rural area. So to maintain consistency in that 2 acres is what's being proposed right now within that. So as a guideline, say from the board, we are looking at maintaining the amount of development and development rights that currently exist in the rural area. That, as far as I know, that's not changing. So if you're wondering kind of what direction that's going, I think actually to an earlier question, the 2-acre lot size comes from, and Mr. Shepherd may be able to help me with this, is back in the day, we had septic system,
Right.
a well, and a reserve. And in order to have a house and space all those things appropriately, that's where the 2-acre size comes from, kind of ballpark. Okay.
May I ask Mr. Svoda a question? Taking my colleague's question about housing, let's say hypothetically, I was a land developer who wanted to build some form of residential housing in the rural area, just hypothetically, a subdivision, of some size, not humongous, but of some size. With the 2-acre minimum requirement, and assuming it stays in the ordinance, what would that person have to do to get permission? Would it have to be a rezoning of a chunk of land to a different category that would no longer be in this category? How would that person proceed?
If you saw a more density,
Right,
meaning to do
Right.
1-acre lot, which is essentially R1, that would
Right.
be a rezoning.
right,
Right, so in order to reduce lot sizes, normally you do a rezoning. Rezonings are done in accordance with the comp plan.
right.
We don't have within our rural area category of the comp plan,
Right.
especially in this spot, and particularly in this spot, a designation for more density, so it doesn't align with the growth plan for the county.
Well, I understand the inconsistency with that, and perhaps that would be fatal, but what I'm wondering is how you would proceed taking his suggestion up, and I assume a rezoning is a different procedure. It's a more political one with the supervisors having to approve a rezoning. It's a legislative
Right.
change.
It's a legislative change, but
Yeah.
it's the option to go through to get the smaller
Correct.
lot.
Correct. And if it were rezoned R1, which is what you've been talking about, would that be permissible for a subdivision plat? That.
Yeah, you could do a subdivision plat in RA, you just have to meet the minimum lot sizes. So
Right,
same
right.
thing as if I was zoned R1, I'd have to rezone
Okay.
to R2 if I want.
Okay,
2
okay.
dwellings per acre.
So that would be the methodology you would have to use if everything were left in place, the regulation and, this category and the minimum lot size. Yes.
I really don't think we should encourage the applicant to look for a rezoning in this area because we're talking about comprehensive plan changes, we're talking about spot zoning, and I really hesitate to even have this discussion with the applicant because it's not something I want to encourage. We've worked many, many years in Albemarle County for clean air, clean water, keeping growth in the growth area, providing the density there, and preserving the rural areas. So I think we may be doing a disservice to this applicant by even having this discussion.
Well, let me respond to what you're saying. I'm not encouraging this applicant to do anything. I'm just following up on the comment that I heard from your neighbor there, wondering what the other procedure would be if a person wanted to do this. I understand that focusing growth and housing in certain areas is desirable according to the comprehensive plan and other policies. But, things do change, and a discussion doesn't force anybody to do anything or encourage anybody. It just clarifies what would be necessary.
All right. Okay. Any more questions for staff?
Not for me.
Is rezoning one parcel legal? Or is that an illegal? I understand. Could you rezone this to village residential or R1? It's my assumption that you can't.
So it's
It would be a
a
spot.
legislative act by the board, right? So someone can make the application, whether or not the board approves it is up to the board. It's got to go through the process. The recommendation would likely match the recommendation within the comp plan for that district. So I would say likely not, although I can't predict the future.
Incredible. Okay, thanks.
Any more questions for staff from the board? Seeing none, we can move over to our applicant, Mr. Lynn, or any of his representatives. Open it up for 15 minutes.
I'm not used to standing in front of government organizations, so.
Miss
bear
Sally?
with me here.
Is the microphone on? It doesn't.
Yes.
look-
It is.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Members of the board, my name is Andrew Lynn. I reside at 634 Clark's Track in Keswick. I'm here today requesting a variance to redraw my boundary lines between 634, which is tax map 81-15, and 654 Clark's Track, which is tax map 8115B2. The adjacent parcel to the east of 654, 15-B1 belongs to me as well. The 1980s ordinance was designed, and I quote from that ordinance, as it was to better preserve Albemarle County's rural character. And as a past avid fox hunter, I have enjoyed open spaces the ordinance helped preserve. The variance I'm requesting adheres to the rural character by adding 5 acres of pasture from 654 to an existing horse farm, and leaves a balance of 1.3 with a house in conformance with the neighboring 1 acre plus or minus size residences. I need the new boundary line to protect my 634 view shed from possible unsightly changes should I have to sell 654. And believe me, with the last, never mind, the last county assessments, I'm like, but I have to sell it, and with the 2 acres that's required for my horses to continue grazing on, I need to have the variance to cut it down to 1.3 acres. Let me see if I can get this to work. Check that out. The picture that's in front of you is with the overlay map that the staff had.
Just gonna make it full screen.
I can see it. The map that they have is great. It shows where that arrow is pointing to is the 2 acre counted requirement that code calls for. These 2 arrows, this is the view from my barn looking across at 654. This is 634 looking at 654. Those 2 arrows is where the variance I'm asking for, the new property line would go. That's the view that you would have from there. This is one of my neighbors. Can the staff throw up the plat on there of what 634 looks like?
Sure.
Because your map doesn't show any other.
Yeah.
Doesn't show any other. There. Okay, look, that's good right there. That's good right there.
Yep, no, I just wanted to get the context of all the other structures like you were,
If you look up, get my name off.
oops, sorry.
If you look up there, the 8114 right there, you just had your finger on it, that one. That's a 1/4 acre lot. I've talked to staff. The only thing I can do with that lot is to put a 12 by 20 building, and I can't even put a septic on it because the neighbor's septic and well is right there. I mean, does that show how much acreage that is? It's 1 point something acre. Going up there to 14A1.
14A1,
Yeah.
0.882.
Yeah, see 0.88 acres and going up to 14A2. That's an acre 1.06. And then same way, see, those are all small lots. I mean, so what I'm asking for, I'm going off my script. What I'm asking for is on 654 is to make that house 1.3. I mean, everything else around is already, it's been subdivided out, whatever you want to call it, it's been done. Give me back over to my screen, please. I think it was a gentleman's, I think it was a gentleman's question that you had about subdivision and what's,
Right.
that's all history. It's all been done. This is immediately next to me. And this is the one that's up next to that one. That's 14, whatever it was. It was the 1 acre one. This is what I'm scared to death. This is my view from my driveway outside of my house, looking across the arrows left and right is the acreage difference of 0.66 acres that I'm asking for the variance from 2 acres to the arrows on the right to the 1.3 to the arrows on the left. I just have a hard time picturing cars, a shop, who knows what's going to come in the neighborhood. I mean, by right, they can put motor homes back there. They can do anything they want, but I'm going to be sitting here looking at it. And that's the reason I'm here asking for the variance. That the arrows on the left, that's where I would put a new fence line. That fence line is 20 feet off of my septic tank. So it's on 654. I'm getting keyed up here. This is looking from my other piece of property that is to the east, looking back toward my barn. The arrow on the left is the 2 acre cutoff line, and the stake and arrow on the right is the 1.3 line. I think that's all I've got. Yeah, that's all I've got. So, the staff has reports where the Virginia Department of Health drawings show that there is a reserved drain field already established on the 1.3 acres. It's there. And it is by the health department, it's the correct distance from the well. So there's no conflict there that as in 1980s, when there was a concern about septics falling apart, that you have to have a reserved drain field. This lot has it. Those other lots up there, the 1 and the 0.88, all of those, none of them have any kind of a space to put a drain field. And consequently, if everything ever happened to those, all of their runoff is coming into my lake. And then you'd have to go back into an engineered sewer system, and it's all, anyway. So it's my desire to keep 634 as a horse farm. Obviously, I'm adding those 5 acres to that. And I'm not interested in subdividing because I want to maintain the rural character that's there. So I asked for the variance. That's what I need. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Have you talked to the staff or your surveyor or considered accomplishing what you're attempting to do here with an easement rather than creating this smaller lot?
If I create the easement, if I go to sell 654, I'm losing that land. I don't want to lose the 5 acres is what I'm trying to do. I don't think an easement, I'm not familiar with it. I don't know how an easement would work.
Not a lawyer? I think you could, if you were to sell that parcel off, if
The
you
whole 7 acres.
the 1.3,
Okay,
which would be, in my thinking, the 2 acres, that part beyond the 1.3, you could put an easement on, which would restrict it forever. You could restrict it from parking, fencing, buildings. You can, it would be basically a private agreement between the owner of your property forever and the owner of the subject property forever.
is that feasible?
Looking to me.
It says attorney.
I mean, basically, I can't advise you legally, but I would recommend you consult a reasonably competent real estate attorney and ask him to advise you on what a scenic easement is and how that can protect yourself in if you decide on to do a 2 acre division in this particular situation and still preserve your view sheds. And I think you'll be enlightened.
We create site distance easements on site plans, and it runs with that property. You you know, as you're coming out of a driveway or something more of a commercial use, you may have a site distance easement, which says you can't plant anything in there. You can't put anything in there. It's in a deed restriction. It's on the plat itself. So it's not anything that somebody doesn't see, but it can be drawn on there and then defined what can happen within that space.
I understand. I understand. I was just going for the simplicity end of it. If it was just a 1.3 lot and done.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Lynn?
Yeah, you know, I think there are ways of preserving this view shed, and I understand what you're trying to accomplish. And looking at the other photos you showed of adjacent properties, I can see why you're concerned about it. The easement approach, as our counsel here suggests, is something you might want to inquire about with a competent attorney who I think can solve your problem. But that aside, let me just put that to one side. I wondered why you drew the line where you did.
I wanted to maximize the pasture coming back to me, coming back to 634.
Okay.
And as a septic tank is on that one particular photo there, if you look at the second mark, that second mark looking back in the middle of the field is where the septic tank is,
Okay, the left-hand side arrow or the right?
the right-hand side.
Right, okay.
And I kept that line 20 feet off.
Because I understand adding the depth into the large parcel adjacent to this. That makes, I understand your purpose, but if you drew that line over where this other arrow is, and maybe I'm not understanding your purpose, you accomplish a lot of what you add this a big chunk of this to the big parcel, adjacent parcel, big one. And I guess I'm wondering why the line has to be where you've drawn it.
It's simply because of the view that I have. This one,
Right,
this view is if I came off anywhere from the line I'm asking for, the 1.3 are the arrows that's on the left,
right.
you know, and that view through there is what I'm trying to keep.
Right. Well, you know, maybe I'm just not
But
understanding.
but on the other side of the coin, if I'm understanding this correct, is that I can without any problem sell the house in 2 acres by existing code, whatever, boom, done, draw the lines, it's done. But in the same token, have deed restrictions on it that says nothing can ever happen to that piece of ground.
Sure.
And that's what you're saying.
No, I'm saying for you to.
You're saying me to contact somebody who will think.
Consult with a reasonably competent real
But this
estate
is in
attorney.
essence
He'll
what you're
enlighten
saying,
you.
and then this is okay.
That's my question. It wasn't a statement. I started by saying, I'm not a lawyer and I haven't, you know, it's a
Yeah.
question.
Any other questions for Mr. Lynn? Yeah, I would just add, that was certainly a thought in my mind as well. And I'm certainly not an attorney either, but I think you said you were looking for the shortest path and the easiest path. And I'm not sure that what Mr. Shepherd suggested is not a shorter path and an easier path. I also similarly had the question of why, dimensionally, it's about 120 feet off of the road that you're asking, you know, a 2 acre parcel would be 120 feet deeper
Right.
than this line.
That's the distance between those arrows that you see there.
And have you investigated giving 654 additional frontage on the road, making it wider rather than?
It's right on the state road. You can't go.
Correct.
You
So,
can't go in.
but you own both parcels on both sides, correct? On the public road?
Already went through staff with this, trying to move that acreage around, and I can't do it. They won't let me go off that 7 acre parcel. Yes, I thought about it. If I went down to my other piece of property and take it off acreage down there to give me 2 acres, they wouldn't let me do it. It has to be on-
So
it
you've
has to be- my
investigated
understanding it's gotta be on that.
doing a
7 acre.
boundary line adjustment, adding frontage along the public road along Clark's Tract to 654 in order to make that parcel wider and meet a 2-acre minimum.
Not allowed. I can't do it off the subdivision.
Okay,
I
well,
can't
that's not a
divide-
question for this board to answer anyway. I
No,
think
but
it's,
staff answered it for me. That's why I'm here
okay,
asking for the
so you have
variance.
investigated it.
Oh, yeah,
All right,
because I know where the fence line it would be, but I've already done that.
okay. Any other questions for Mr. Lynn? Thank you, Mr. Lynn.
Thank you for your time.
All right, I'd like to open the public hearing portion of today's meeting. It's a time when any members of the public that are present that have either signed up or have not signed up and want to speak can do so for up to 3 minutes. Looking earlier, I don't think we had anybody signed up, and we still do not have anybody signed up. Is there any member of the public that would like to speak right now? All right, seeing none, I can close that public hearing portion. And we can give, circle back to county staff for 5 minutes of closing remarks. And I'll just remind the board that the way we try to do this is to roll right through the staff's rebuttal time right into the applicant's time with no questions in between.
Commissioner McCall, do you have anything to add?
No.
Okay. So Mr. Chair, members of the board, Andy Herrick, County Attorney. So I appreciate the board's questions about the rationale, the history, and so forth. I think that that's somewhat enlightening, but as the staff report points out, Albemarle County Code 18-10.4 requires that the minimum lot size for the rural areas is 2 acres. And so the question for the board is, does this 2-acre minimum unreasonably restrict the utilization of the applicant's 7+ acre parcel? That really is the question for the board, not what the history of the 2-acre minimum is, not how many other parcels are in the neighborhood or less than 2 acres. It's does that 2-acre minimum unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property? There are other alternatives that the applicant could seek. I think the scenic easement or the no build zone is certainly one option. Obviously, there are no guarantees, but that's an option. A rezoning of the property, taking it before the Board of Supervisors for the Board of Supervisors to decide what the appropriate zoning of the property is another option. I know the applicant pointed out to the board the number of less than 2-acre lots that were in the general vicinity. I don't know the history. I haven't researched it. My strong suspicion is that all of those sub 2-acre lots were approved prior to 1980, and that after 1980, as Mr. McCall indicates to my knowledge, the county has not approved, at least systematically, lots of smaller than 2 acres in the rural areas. So again, focusing the board just on the specific question of whether a 2-acre lot minimum is an unreasonable restriction of the utilization of this property, I think is the question for the board. And I think that as the board has seen, that the applicant can still get reasonable utilization of the property, even if a 2-acre lot minimum is imposed on this property. And so we would ask the board to deny this variance application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herrick. Mr. Lynn, would you like to come up for 5 minutes of up to 5 minutes of closing remarks? Okay, Mr. Lynn does not need that extra time, so I can open it up to board discussion.
I don't think that I found a view shed is by right anywhere in our ordinance. The place I found view shed had to do with Monticello, and that was in the comprehensive plan. And it just asked developers to look in the comp plan, to look at the Monticello view shed. So there really wasn't any teeth in that either. It was something for the developer to contemplate if they were developing within the Monticello view shed. So I don't feel that it is a right. I do think that there are other means of doing exactly what Mr. Lynn wants to do, aside from reducing the required size of a lot in the rural areas. It isn't something that I feel that I could support because full disclosure, I used to be Andy's neighbor. So I used to own a property on Clark's Track. And there are other properties on there that have development rights that could come in and for whatever reason say, I need to preserve my view shed, so I need to make something less than 2 acres on this property. So I just, Mr. Lynn, you're a heck of a guy. But I can't support this way of doing what you want to do.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph. Any other discussion?
I'd like to really tag this, clearly I don't support this, but I want to just cite a couple of ordinance sections and just the key parts of the.
Sure.
Okay, so as far as a definition of a variance, talk about, it's not would have to be not contrary to the purpose of the ordinance. As I was speaking before, I think the ordinance has a very clear purpose in reducing development in the rural areas and increasing and encouraging development in the growth areas. So I think that's a key point. On the two basic concepts that both have to be found positively for a variance to be approved, we have to find it's an unreasonable restriction. I do not think creating a 2-acre lot is an unreasonable restriction. Or you have to show a hardship. I do not see the hardship. And you get down into the 5 criteria, this is generally not recurring. I think every time a person goes to a surveyor and says, I want to subdivide my property, and I'd like to do this, I'd like the lot to be less than 2 acres, that would require this variance. Any subdivider encounters this same rule and has since December 10th, 1980. And this would be, that's an agreement that has been abided by, that every subdivider, in this situation has adhered to. And so I think it does not meet that criteria, that this is a recurring situation. So for those 3 reasons, plus the definition, that's the basis of my vision here.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd.
I've got 3 comments. I'm inclined to support the staff recommendation for 3 reasons. Because of the strict application of the 2-acre lot minimum. Denying the variance does not unreasonably restrict the use of this property, and granting the variance would not alleviate a hardship due to a physical condition related to the property. So for those reasons, I'll be voting in favor of the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Burkhart.
I'm persuaded to agree with my colleagues from what I've heard. Understanding the purpose was important to me, and I didn't know what you had said. And I think the 2-acre minimum does not seem to impose an unreasonable hardship. It doesn't seem to be dramatically more restrictive, and in the usual variance case, the impact is usually much greater in terms of adverse effect on the landowner's utility and options. So I would agree with what I've heard and vote accordingly. Again, to support the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenberg. I agree with my colleagues. While we can all be sympathetic to not wanting pretty view sheds to be filled with broken down cars, there's a strict application that this board is charged with following on this, and I don't find that this request satisfies the criteria. So I concur. With that, are there any motions? Mr.
Call the question.
McCall, would you maybe put up the,
Miss Allie's putting it up on the screen.
thank you. Any motions?
Okay. I move to deny the variance application VA 2024-00003, 654 Clark's Track lot for the reasons stated in the staff report and in the discussion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Hearing a motion and a second, Ms. Alley, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Joseph,
Aye.
Mr. Rosenberg,
Aye.
Mr. Burkhart,
Aye.
Mr. Shepherd,
Aye.
Mr. Carrington,
Aye. Um, Variance application has been denied by a 5-0 vote. And we can move on to item 3B of our agenda, which is review and readopt rules of procedure. The way I understand this to work is we're going to obviously look at the existing rules of procedure. I sent those to each of you individually, and I think everybody has been digging into them. This is a two-step process. If we do want to make any amendments, we would agree on what the amendments might be today, and then they would be actually formally adopted at our next meeting. So I can open it up for discussion of the existing rules of procedure.
Mr. Chairman, I have 4 that I'd like to propose, but no, we'll obviously take those one at a time if that's agreeable with you.
This is in our, just for the board members, this is in our packet. It starts on page 3, the current rules of procedure.
I'm looking at section 1, officers. A, I propose the following, where it reads on any application or appeal, the chair may administer oaths and compel attendance of witnesses, that we eliminate the word may and replace it with shall, and I will provide my justification for that. Under Virginia Code Section 15.2-2312, procedure on appeal states in part that chairman of the board, or in his absence, the acting chairman may administer oaths and compel the attendance of witnesses, end of quote. This is consistent with the current rules of procedures, but does not require the chairman to administer oaths. It is my opinion only that those who come before this board may have varying accounts of what they believe to be true, while others may simply be expressing opinion. As a quasi-judicial body, I believe it's incumbent upon this tribunal to administer to each who provides testimony to do so in a manner that holds the penalty of perjury for willfully providing testimony that is knowingly false or misleading on matters before the board. While this process may take a few extra minutes of time every meeting, by doing so, we are assured that whatever has been provided to each of us in our deliberation is truthful.
So are you saying that Mr. Lynn should have that Mr. Carrington should have administered an oath to Mr. Lynn and asked him, is that what you're saying?
No, because it's not in our rules and procedures. I'm simply proposing that.
No, but that's what you're saying that you want to happen.
Yes.
So anybody that comes, any member of the public that comes in wants to speak on it, the applicant themselves, what happens if an attorney comes in? You want an attorney to do that too?
I'd yield the counsel on that.
Sure, why not? If
Yes.
that's what you want.
I would just caution maybe the shall to me is going to make us do it 100% of the time. And if somebody chooses to not show up, shall compel the attendance of witnesses. It feels really rigid. I appreciate the thought, and maybe we need to get into a practice of administering oaths more often than we have in the past, which is, to my knowledge,
Never.
0.
Yeah. Never.
But it makes me nervous to have to do it every time.
May I then amend my proposal at the discretion of the chair? I say this because we've had folks coming in giving accounts of what they believe to be true, and then we hear sometimes maybe some contrary opinion on that. And I think it really, I mean, these matters, this is a quasi judicial body that has the full force and effect of law. So I take our role quite seriously, and not just anybody that would come up to provide what they think. I mean, it's got to be, just as we have to have a finding of fact.
Right.
I think it is so too with those that come before this board need to do so in a matter that is taken most seriously rather than just opinionated, because we're affecting people's property and potential livelihood and other things.
I really appreciate your deep thinking about it and don't disagree with anything you've said. I would just suggest that adding at the chair's discretion, for instance, I think the chair already has the authority in that current rules of procedure. I think it's more about the practice of
Yeah.
actually doing what the authority we already have to do.
I want to ask staff, can you recall within the application itself, does it ask the applicant to state that everything that they are presenting, everything that they're saying in this is truthful? I guess that's the others, because I don't know. I haven't filled out one of these in a long time.
Page 25 of your packet has
24
the
and 25,
application.
yeah.
So without fully reading it, I can't really make that statement whether.
Where,
It's packet page 24 and 25 is the variance application.
so,
That's just a variance application.
so is it anywhere on here that says,
Again, here, it says on the.
Yes, it's on page 25 at the very bottom.
okay, I also certify that the information is accurate, true, and correct? Okay. Thank you.
How
for
does,
this.
we have multiple attorneys, I think, up here, and one in particular that's charged with representing us. Do you feel confident that the authority of the chair to administer oaths and compel attendance of witnesses exists in our current rules of procedure?
I think you could do it on individual cases if that's what you feel is necessary, because the chair has latitude in determining how the meetings to be run, but
And even more so, maybe 1A that Mr. Burkhart pointed us to ends with, on any application or appeal, the chair may administer oaths and compel the attendance of witnesses. So
right, and that's from the statute, and understand that administering the oath is a command to the person speaking to tell the truth, but you have to realize that it's very unlikely that that's going to lead to a perjury charge that's prosecuted by the local Commonwealth Attorney's Office, because if for nothing else, they have enough problems just dealing with the testimony they hear in court, which is under oath.
right.
If I may, listening to the language you just read may cause witnesses to appear. Do we have subpoena power?
Off the top of my head, I don't think you do. I mean, by statutory grant, county attorneys here, maybe you can enlighten me. Some quasi-administrative bodies do have subpoena.
I believe that this body does, and the reason I say that, and Mr. Burkhart cited it, was 15.22312 of the state code does have that. The chairman may administer oaths and compel attendance of witnesses.
Compel.
I read that to
Okay,
be
so then you
a
do.
subpoena power of this body. But at least the state statute is phrased in the may, and I think that's where this board's rules of procedures come from.
So you can compel witnesses to attend if you think that's appropriate at a certain point.
So I take Mr. Herrick's comment as may compel attendance, meaning subpoena power, because how else would you compel attendance? Okay. I would like to argue against the motion and say we should retain the may language the way it is for another reason, and that's conformity with the state code. In Virginia, conformity with state statute is extremely important, especially in terms of judicial review, and deviation from it with rules often is both criticized and overturned in courts. So my argument is if we keep the parallelism between these rules and what the state statute says with the may language, understanding that the chair can elect or not elect to exercise those authorities, I think we at least eliminate an objection to say, well, your rules are inconsistent with state statute and are illegal. And I could see an argument like that being raised in some very controversial case we can't imagine today.
My question would be, if we do have the power to issue subpoenas, is that something that we would do in closed session,
No, you would do it in open session.
open session?
And
Okay.
I've never seen it done, but
It was brought up, yeah.
well, I mean, it's in the code and there was a recent discussion in local government attorneys listserv about maybe I'm picking this up from bylaws of other
Right.
BZAs, but some BZAs do swear witnesses.
Uh-huh.
And I think there was a discussion that I saw about subpoena power of
Right.
bodies, but seldom, I would say it's seldom used and never been used in my
Here.
experience.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, based on the discussion, I'll withdraw that proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Burkhart. Again, appreciate you thinking critically about that provision. Sounds like you might have some other ones.
I do.
Ideas.
The second one is to amend section 1, officers D, recording secretary. I am proposing to include immediately after the adjourned in the minutes, where it now reads recorded by Marcia Alley and transcribed by Golden Transcription Services. The following be added. This meeting may be viewed through this link. Albemarle County why I say that is Albemarle County has a YouTube channel, and for each meeting that's concluded, the link to that page online is where the public can easily access, and that's the key, easily. When I go to the BZA website or a page on the county website, I think it'd be a lot. I think having multiple access points to our meetings would serve the public well. By having an extra line at the end of the minutes that would have a live link that could take them directly there, rather than having to look at the BZA website page where it lists next 7 days, all meetings, recordings, and so on. It just makes access for the public a lot easier.
Just for clarity, that link would be added to the minutes.
It would be at the end of the sentence where it says, we would add another sentence after Golden Transcription Services. And I'm proposing that this meeting may be viewed through this link. And then, the link would be, would take it to the Albemarle County YouTube page of these meetings.
Is that, I know, I'm not finding that in our rules of procedure. You said one delta.
Officers D, recording secretary.
So my language in my draft is different. It doesn't have anything pertaining to Miss Alley or to Golden. Even though, of course, those folks are working hard behind the scenes.
I may have erred on that, but all the same, I think that what I would like on the recording, it says here, shall include keeping the minutes to BZA meetings and other duties as they provide from time to time. And again, then you take a look at the minutes, and this is what I'm referring to, is at the end of the minutes. If you take a look at the language on the very end of the minutes, it's in parens or in parentheses about the minutes that are transcribed. And I'm just asking that we have that included in terms of what the recording secretary will add to our minutes. Yes, John.
I think that's a good idea, but I would suggest removing the names of people and identify them by their position. In other words, rather than say Marcia Alley, say the staff recorder, and then rather than Beth Goldman, you'd say the transcriber, or,
Somehow we're missing on this because my version doesn't have any names on it. Are we able to put this up on the screen? Our current rules of procedure?
It's page 55 of the packet.
Reported by Marcia right there.
Packet
Just have another-
three,
I
packet
think
page
you're
3 doesn't have
referencing
any
the minutes.
names.
There
He's
aren't any
referencing the
names in the
minutes
current bylaw.
themselves,
Yes.
not the bylaws.
There
or
aren't any
the
names in the
procedure.
current bylaw.
Yeah, there aren't any.
But I'm saying in the recording secretary.
We're just
Excuse
jumping
me,
into
Mr.
the
Chairman.
minutes now.
Mhm.
On page
So-
3, I believe Mr. Burkhart is referring to item 1D and the duties that follow there.
Yes.
But I think he's referencing the last page of the minutes, which is actually packet page 55.
Mhm.
I understand. I would just suggest, I don't think that, I mean, in our rules of procedure discussion, that seems like an easy thing that we can ask staff to add to
That'd be
the
great.
minutes.
I
And
think
the
we can
actual
make that
rules of
accommodation
procedure
on the minutes.
don't
We
need to
can-
change, I would suggest. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Is everybody comfortable with that?
Like the idea.
Totally agree with the idea. I
Right.
just don't think it's a rules of procedure add.
I just was looking at recording secretary, thought it might be, but that's fine. Okay.
Nope, thank you.
Can
Keep
I move
going.
on to the third?
Absolutely, please.
To amend section 3, order of business to include after B, organization of the agenda, a new item 3, ex parte communications, which follows Virginia Code 15.2-2308.1 A, B, C, D. Boards of Zoning Appeals, ex parte communication proceedings. Here's the rationale on this. The chair would ask each one of the board members whether they've had any ex parte communications with county staff members of the Board of Supervisors, the applicant or appellant to any matter that is before the BZA. All parties must work from the same understanding that the information that they've received is available to everyone. I'm going to mention later in the meeting a conversation that Mr. Shepherd and I had with Supervisor Lepisto and Kirtley outside after a meeting back in December. And I think is relevant that we share those kinds of conversations that we've had, because the exchange that we had was actually quite interesting. And I think that would be something, it would only take a couple of minutes to ask each board member, has anybody had any ex parte communications relative to matters before the board?
Can I address this question? I have taken the position that subjects that we consider here are things I don't discuss with other people, especially elected officials. And I would avoid doing what I've just heard for the reasons, for lots of reasons that, so in terms of best practices, I think avoiding those kinds of conversations totally, as long as a person is on a board like this, which is a quasi judicial, I mean, judges don't do this. Judges don't do this to attorneys, to parties in cases, to interested parties, they would be reprimanded. So I think we should be cognizant of how, first of all, how it appears. You're an applicant in a coming case and they see two board members talking to a supervisor about something that is relevant. Just in terms of best practices, this swearing that I haven't talked to any ex parte contacts, I think that would I think there should be something maybe referencing the state statute that says that there shouldn't be any, or whatever that statute does say. But every meeting having a swearing contest that none of us talk to anybody, I think that is probably unnecessary as long as we understand our roles.
What I want to ask you is, if the case has already been heard, a decision has been made, everything that's happened here is public knowledge at that point.
Right.
What is your feeling about talking to a board member after a decision has been made?
If it were me, I wouldn't do it because I think it looks bad. People see you talking. They don't exactly know what you're talking about. They could say, oh, you're getting a cheerleading session from the elected official, or you're giving, I did what you asked me to do. They don't know that you're not saying that. And it just looks bad. You're a judge, you know, you're not a politician. And it's hard because we all have friends. You know, I have friends on staff here that I don't go to lunch with anymore because of that reason. You know, and when I'm no longer on the BZA, I will start again. So it's, you know, the appearance of impropriety, I think, is very persuasive to me. And you know, it doesn't really, it's not germane to what you're saying about swearing that we haven't had ex parte contacts. I think there should be a prohibition on that for sure. But every meeting, I mean, every matter, to say this, I just think it would just slow down things, and our chair probably knows better about that.
Well, let me give some context to that. After the meeting, and of course, we're getting up on holiday time, and as we're outside, there were people milling around and other meetings going on out there. Mr. Shepherd and I just found ourselves sitting out there just gabbing about just gabbing, and who walks by was a supervisor. And I just asked staff, would it be appropriate to be able to talk with a supervisor about a letter that had been sent regarding alternates? And hopefully we can get into that as well. Ms. Lepistro currently walked over to us and commended us for the job that we did. Said, you guys have tough decisions to do. We only had 3 people that night making a decision. Obviously, our vote had to be unanimous that night. And I broached the subject about the letter. Have you seen the letter? Well, she hadn't. And that gave her great concern. I had asked, that's why I asked at the meeting, which 3 of us were at, about the protocols and whether that was appropriate. I got the indication clearly, yes, if you know a supervisor and you want to talk about it, go right ahead. That's what we did. So anyway, at least we're recognized for the work we do up here by somebody on the Board of Supervisors. It was not a conversation that we initiated. She was congratulating us on the work that we were doing, which led to a conversation that followed at the close of the meeting. Can we talk to supervisors? I asked about the propriety of that, whether we could. Do you concur, Mr. Shepherd?
Yes, I have to say, I didn't know her before then.
No.
I mean, I was in the room. I didn't really
She's my supervisor, yeah.
like participate in the conversation, but I was there and, you know, yes.
So those are the kinds of things that I think if the chair were to ask at the next meeting, we could say yes, or if there's if the wish is just avoid that, because rightly so, you've got 2 people on a board that are out there talking about the soccer game, talking about the Super Bowl. Nobody knows what they're talking about except those 2 people.
To play devil's advocate, one thing you could think about is that there's certain prohibitions in the statute that you're not able to have discussions with as far as staff goes. And once you raise something, that creates at least the appearance of a duty to notify the applicant or the other side of this contact before the actual meeting where you make the decision. So you create a little due process procedural issue, if you want to call it that, by perhaps setting this out in your rules and regulations. Am I making sense, Mr. Burkhardt?
You are.
So in other words, all of a sudden you've had an innocent conversation with a supervisor, which is not really the staff that the statute's talking about. That's the supervisor is not considered the staff that the legislation talks about forbidding contact between the 2. But at that point, then you could create an issue with the appearance of somehow you violated the statute because you disclosed it, so you must have a duty to do so, on and on and on.
Any further discussion?
While we're on that point, if anybody does have any inadvertent discussion with anybody from the zoning staff, then they should notify the staff and the other members immediately so that the other side can be informed of that contact and the nature of it before the actual meeting in which a decision is made.
I think staff has been really good about making that very clear, to me anyways, that whatever was going on, they're not there to answer my questions at that point, but answer questions during the meeting itself. I think during the orientation, you guys were telling us that if we did have a question, that it was important for you to make sure that the applicant heard what that question was and what the answer was that was given to us. So that part I found very clear with direction from staff.
Right. And at the same time, if you see Francis on the street, there's nothing wrong with saying hello to him and acting like you know him. And vice versa. If
Yep,
that
and
makes
as soon as
sense.
you ask about something, I turn around and walk away.
Well, no, you
About
just
that having to
say,
do with the
I-
work that we're doing. So,
yeah,
I
you
mean,
just say, I
that's,
can't discuss
yeah,
that, but
yes.
you can
I mean,
say
that's-
hello and
Yes.
how are you doing? And what'd you think about this or that? It
Yep.
doesn't relate to what
Yeah.
the zoning matter.
I like your car.
I want to give Mr. Rosenberg, seeing the clock, a chance to just suggest any sort of
I have
amendments or
no
otherwise.
further comments. I appreciate all the effort that people have put into reviewing these rules, and there's not a lot of enjoyment reviewing rules. And I have no further comments. This comment about ex parte comments and conversations with staff. I was just thinking about, I wonder if you had a question between meetings, about even a general question pertaining to a matter that you knew was about to come up at the next meeting. And you wanted to educate yourself and get the opinion of the staff on something. Do we have a mechanism so an inquiry could be made? I mean, maybe this is just going too far afield to the staff, but also to make it known to the applicant or does that just, counsel, do you think that just is, you're asking for trouble to do that?
I mean, if you have a general question that relates to the issue at hand, the proper way to do it is to make a communication to me, and then I can make a
Okay.
communication to the board's attorney.
Okay,
I mean, not the board's, the staff's
Yeah.
attorney, and then we can deal with it that way.
okay,
Generally, Bo, if it relates specifically to a matter that it's coming up at the next meeting, that's, you don't want to have any discussion with staff about that, vice
Right.
versa.
right.
Or if you do have an inadvertent discussion, then you have to disclose it to the
Sure.
other side.
Sure.
And the same applies, so I think
Well-
everybody understands.
Well,
that.
like today's matter where the question came up, has there ever been a variance from the 2-acre minimum, in your experience, in the context, in the past, have we ever done this before? And that came up in the meeting, and the context of coming up in the meeting was okay because the applicant is there and could hear the response. But I wonder if a person had that idea on the board member, would they not ask that question? Or would they ask you that question?
Uh,
Is that a question you don't
But-
want to address?
I mean, if it relates directly, this was all about a 2-acre minimum
Right.
lot size on a request for variance that was coming before you at the next meeting. So it would not be something you'd want to ask the applicant or the staff, but you could ask me to ask that, and I could ask the staff's attorney that they could gather that information so it would be available to the board at the hearing.
Right, I understand what you're saying. So, okay, well, what you're saying is via you, if we ever had a question like the one the
That
hypothesis.
specifically relates to the issue at hand that's
Yeah.
coming up for a hearing.
Because in past meetings, we've had similar questions. Has it ever come up before? Has there ever been, a similar case? What has the board done or what has the staff said? And it's looking backwards kind of questions, for precedent or for practices.
And then from time to time, you'll see Marcia send out to you materials that are, or to the applicant materials that have been received after the initial packet went out.
Uh-huh.
She sends again those new materials out to everybody.
Okay. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenberg. Good luck. Mr. Rosenberg is stepping out at 3:20.
I have,
Mr. Burker, I believe you have,
I have one more and maybe I'll get a home run on this one.
well, and we may not be done with the ex parte. I don't know
okay.
how you feel about the status of our discussion about that topic, but it seems like what I'm hearing is that we are all bound by the rules that govern ex parte comms. And Mr. Rosenberg expressed a concern and Mr. Bowling expressed a little bit of a procedural question. And Mr. Rosenberg's was optics and Mr. Bowling's was centered on procedure. But how do you feel about current status of the discussion?
I'm pleased with the discussion. I'll tell you why, because we only have this chance once a year to go
Mhm.
through the rules and procedures. It's kind of dusting things off. We get a chance to maybe put some, we've had distance from them because we only look at them
Yeah.
once a year. And so I think it's great to bring these up and at least if nothing else, as my colleague said, having discussion is good.
Absolutely.
So maybe that's something, at least there's greater awareness about it. If we find a reason to move on it, maybe we amend at that time, but I wanted to bring that up because
Thank you.
because I will tell you where I used to live in Southern California, Carlsbad, California, the mayor would always ask the council members, has anybody had any ex parte communications? And do you realize that took only about 3 minutes of time? That was it. People said, yeah, I talked to Johnny Jones over here. We talked about that. And, but he said, we go to the church and, and that's sort of how the conversation went. So it was to dispel any an appearance of conflict of interest on the part of people in the public.
Understood. I think that's.
Yeah, and the appearance thing is not going to stop me from talking to a supervisor about all kinds of different things or talking to staff when I see them in different places in the community because I'm bound by whatever restrictions that we have and we know what the restrictions are and we don't talk to them and Francis would turn around and walk away. So it's, I mean, it's just if we started talking about the wrong thing. So I think that the other thing is I have trust board. And I think we need to have trust in each other that we're going to do that. So I think what I hear from Mr. Burkhardt is did have a conversation. It did have to do with the BZA, not necessarily with the outcome of whatever it was that we were
No.
hearing, but the fact that we do have a relationship with the Board of Supervisors and we kind of wonder what happened to the letter we wrote to them.
We can circle back to that letter here shortly. Why don't we let you jump to your fourth rules of
Okay.
procedure point?
Hopefully this one's a crowd pleaser. I hope so. To amend section 5, voting procedures, D, the votes. I propose to include a new line, a second line that would read as it is written in the Code of Virginia, section 15.2-2311D, appeals to the board, which states, and I quote, in any appeal taken pursuant to this section, if the board attempts to reach a decision that results in a tie vote, the matter may be carried over until the next scheduled meeting at the request of the person filing the appeal. I have some justification for this. I would propose that in the Board of Zoning Appeals in-person meeting guidelines, that this be included because we've had 6 meetings in 2023. Of those 6 meetings, 3 of those, let me back up in a second. We had 6 meetings and half of those meetings, we only had, let me back up again.
3 members?
Yep. Now, as I have written, we had 6 meetings in 2023 with only 3 of those meetings in which we had all 5 board members attending. That's 50%. In 2024, the meetings held, 1 did not have all 5 members. That's 24%. In those meetings and following public hearings, the BZA voted on 7 matters. One of those would have been afforded the appellant the request under the section I just mentioned that the matter be carried over until the next scheduled meeting. I've looked back to the recording from June 6th, 2023 meeting, and no such direction was provided to the appellant. So what I'm doing is asking that the language that's in the state statute be provided in a tie vote, and so that it is very, very clear that if we have a tie vote, that the appellant there's some guidance on what they can do.
That is a home run.
Pardon me?
That is a home
It's a
run,
home run.
in my opinion.
You got it.
Right.
And that you're just mirroring what the statute already provides.
Correct.
Yeah.
But it's not been stated to the appellant.
I think that could be added, that would be K under. There's motion for a rehearing, and then there's a nice little slot for that.
Well,
But you got
you proposed it be
Under-
placed in D,
with
correct?
tie votes.
Yeah,
Yes.
where it says tie votes.
I-
Under,
I would just think that on a tie vote, we would need to
Voting
specify that
procedure.
that is particular to a variance request or an appeal, because we make lots of motions that are not pertaining to variances or appeals. So maybe it would be
Yes.
appropriate to put it up in A 1 and 2, or somewhere else, maybe K, like Mr. Shepherd just
And then I would
suggested.
recommend you just follow the statutory language when you do that.
Follow the, and Mr. Bowling, do you have an opinion of whether we would tack that on to A 1 or 2 or create a new bullet?
You're making me think too much, but I would stick
That's
it
why we
with,
pay you the
I
big
was sticking
bucks.
with tie votes since it follows,
Yeah,
it's a,
two.
that seems pretty logical where it should be. Although, Mr. Shepherd, that's not to say your point's not right.
I'm the kind of person that you need to spell it out for me. So if I'm looking at tie votes, that's where I want to
Sure.
find it.
Yeah.
Instead of reading through something else.
So might the language say something about in the event that the tie vote is,
Well, no, you just follow the statutory language exactly.
References tie votes.
Yes. When there's not a full house of the BZA members present. It's what it
or
speaks
an
to.
abstention or something
Yeah.
else?
Well, the statute is, I haven't got the statute before me.
I agree.
You have,
You have it,
read
have it?
You have it, want to just read it, or
Why don't you read it if you're sure
So-
it's current?
15.2, 2311.d.
Closer to the mic.
Yeah, gotta
please.
hear you.
So in any appeal taken pursuant to this section, if the board's attempt to reach a decision results in a tie vote, the matter shall be carried over until the next scheduled meeting at the request of the person filing the appeal.
But then that's what you say.
That's what it is. That's what I suggested.
And you just add that at the end as a second sentence under tie vote. If that's what the board wants to do.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. I'm happy for it to go there. I don't have any problem with it. So the language for the motion maybe is add that as a second sentence, add 15.2-2311
Yep.
D is in Delta to 5D.
Yes,
Yep.
that's
And
exactly
just
what I
tack it on.
proposed. Yep.
Yep.
That's,
Mhm.
that's the state
Yep.
code number.
Okay.
Well, I got one. Gotta have a vote.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna vote on it today, but I think we can reach consensus, and I'm seeing lots of nods, so we can make that change. Along with any others that we come up with, we'll adopt it next meeting.
But let me also suggest that in the guidelines that we have right here on the meeting guidelines. And I mentioned this, that in addition to amending our rules and procedures, these guidelines, there should be another sentence that follows, on the first part, under general information, the last sentence says, the BZA reserves the right to digress from these guidelines in any particular case. You could put it before or after that, but I think that, that there needs to be language in there that.
Excuse me, sir, where are you now?
This right here on the guide.
Oh, this is not the
It's
rules of
the second
procedure.
page of the
Oh, it's not
agenda. This,
guidelines.
yeah.
Look at, yeah.
All right.
I think if people are reading this, I think it would, we've got all kinds of information down here. Keep your conversation or your presentation at 3 minutes per speaker, et cetera, what the rules are for the public here. I think it'd be helpful to be able to have a line in here that would mirror something similar to what we've just discussed as far as how a tie vote will be treated.
I'm not sure I'm following your
Okay.
thought processes on that, sir. I mean, because that has nothing to do there with tie votes.
No, but we get to digress from these guidelines. Okay. I'll leave it at, I'll take the home run.
Thank you.
It can be the BZA's responsibility that if there is a tie vote, that the chair can then announce
Yes.
to the appellant that this is what happens and here are your rights. Is that you can appeal this, you can come back next month when we have a full board. If we have a full board next month.
Yeah.
So it's something that maybe it's our responsibility and doesn't necessarily have to be in print.
Sure. Sounds good.
Well, I think Mr. Bowling in the past has suggested that we be really careful with those suggestions
that's
because of offering legal advice. But maybe we can have some asterisk or disclaimer or point them to a certain section, but
Can't you just reference what we just went over?
State code provides this.
I mean, I mean,
Just
let's ask
reference
Mr. Bowling. He's sitting here.
Reference your rules of
that's all you have to
procedure.
do is reference the rules. You can reference the rules of procedure and
Exactly.
Yeah, but that
And
wasn't
5D.
exactly what you said. You were talking about advising the applicant of his rights to request an appeal.
well, yes, I was. Because I think we should tell them.
Well, I know, but I said something different.
Okay.
After our actions, does the staff send a notice of the result of the hearing? You know, I know, does that have appeal language in it? Could it have appeal language in it? I know, other determinations, that I used to work on always would have the 30-day appeal thing and just automatically boilerplate it into, well, if there was a tie, and this only would refer, you know, in this discussion, but it seems like that would be a place to.
My understanding is that is correct, that we do notify them of the result of the meeting and any course of action that they would legally have.
Your appeal language in that letter?
I'd have to look at that. I believe that's the case, but
No, I don't believe so.
no,
That we
not
would do
in a
any
variance.
appeal language because this is quasi judicial board. So we don't advise you on how to appeal that decision. That's up to you as the applicant. And the appeal section that you're discussing only applies to appeals. Doesn't apply to variances. It doesn't apply to special permits. Doesn't apply to SEs, anything else that you do. It's only appeal. So a to tie on a variance is a done deal. That's not an appeal. So this is strictly, should go in the appeal section if you're going to add it. I don't want to advise you, well, let Mr. Bowling do that. But it's not an overall statement for anything that you do. It's only for appeals in that section. It's I think it's first 3 or 4 words in that sentence.
yeah, I was comfortable adding it to the general tie vote provision just because it does start with in the case of an appeal. But I'm tracking with you.
Okay.
But I have a question. If we do have a 2-2 vote, which we've had
Mhm.
on, I'd say it was quite a celebrated matter that came before the BZA. If they think their only relief after that is to pursue other options in the courts, perhaps, instead of saying, I'd like to have this rescheduled to the next meeting, to have it reheard when, because that's what this
Well,
allows
it's
for,
not a
the next
rehearing.
regularly
I think
scheduled
that
meeting.
We'd have to discuss that with the attorneys, but it's not a rehearing. It's kind of held over, so we don't redo the whole thing. It's held over. I'd have to look at the statute.
I don't know if I agree with that.
So you don't think
It's
it's like? a
carried
I
over.
don't know. I mean,
Right,
I don't
so
know
it's
where you're
it's
going.
carried over. The public hearing has been held and closed.
Right.
Would be something for us to discuss,
right,
right?
but there's an absent member, and they reach a 2-2 tie. At that point, the statute, would John, you want to read it again?
In any appeal taken pursuant to this section, if the board's attempt to reach a decision results in a tie vote, the matter may be carried over
Mhm.
until the next scheduled meeting at the request of the person filing the appeal.
Right, so the public hearing's been held.
Right?
Everybody had their opportunity, been held and closed. So without re-advertising the public hearing, and again, this is procedural things we'll need to talk about. Carried over, the absent member would go back to the minutes or the recording and view it that way. But the procedurally due process has been followed up to that point.
Right, but you still have to allow a hearing with the new member for a chance to be present. That's the whole point of why you appeal. I'm missing your argument.
Well, that's
You-
right. I
you
have to
didn't-
let you and,
Yeah, I mean,
the two
I don't
attorneys.
know whether you'd have to do the whole thing over again, or you could have a transcript prepared, or whether you'd have to re-advertise.
Right, so, and
And I'm assuming the person that appealed would have to pay for it, and if you had a re-advertisement. I mean, one argument says, well, you just give him, I don't know how you do it, but I would just say, have another public hearing.
well, there's due process rights on both sides, right? And so that's procedurally what we'll have to talk about because
Yeah.
the
But
person
we're talking,
making
but
the.
right now it's hypothetical, so why don't we
Right,
wait? till
whether
it
I'm the
happens?
person making the appeal, meaning I'm the person who was alleged in violation, right? Or whether I'm the neighbor disagreeing with a decision that, say, staff made on an appeal, right? There's some due
Yeah.
process in either case where we want to make sure that we don't delay it unnecessarily either way, right? And at the same time, being fair. So that I believe that probably warrant more discussion. I don't know. I would base this particular, adding this clause on
Yeah.
that. But if you would want to do it, I would recommend Mr. Bowling does which is just follow the state statute, but be clear if you decide to give this type of guidance, either in writing in your minutes or in your bylaws or rules and procedures or on any form, that it's strictly for appeals. So-
Right, and that's why I just leave it in the rules of procedure and call it a day.
And so what guidance does this give to the appellant that decides that they want to have this carried over into the next scheduled meeting? What are the expectations for the appellant at that next meeting in terms of actions by the board?
I couldn't answer that right now.
Well, I can answer that. I think it's obvious that the statute is designed, and Andy, you pipe up if you disagree, but it's obvious that the statute envisions that if one of the board members is not absent in that situation, that he'd be given, at least he'd be given an opportunity to hear the whole thing again. And it may well be that the other members are influenced by the missing member and decide, wait a minute, I don't agree now with what I did before. And that seems to be fair too. Just my thought. But how often does this happen? I mean, we had the unique experience where it happened in one case. It was the
Was
gun
gun
case,
one.
the gun
Yep.
case, yeah.
Yep.
And that person went ahead and appealed anyhow to the circuit court.
I think there's general consensus that adding the exact language from the state code to 5D is not problematic and generally well received across the board. So maybe we can move forward to any other rules and procedures changes that the board would like to make. But that one will be, I hope.
Could I ask a question
sure.
on that? With the way it reads now, a tie vote shall defeat the motion voted upon. You want to switch that to just the statute from?
No, I don't think so. I think the suggestion is that would stay and that there would be another sentence tacked on there, a second sentence. Ms. Joseph, I agree with what you said about explaining it and making it very clear. I wonder again whether we might put it up into A2, which is the section on appeals, and it spells out very clearly like what's required in terms of appeals, which is 3 affirmative votes in order to reverse an appeal. It doesn't really matter to me where
Or
it
you could
goes.
put it in
but-
both places.
That's what I'm
You know,
thinking.
that can't hurt either.
Redundancy on something like that, I don't think is bad.
That's good.
So we will provide a revised rules and procedures.
Yeah, are there any
for
other
whenever
changes
the
that y'all
next
have?
meeting is so that we can advertise it
Mr. Shepherd, do
properly.
you have one or two?
That was gonna be me.
Okay,
So
but it sounds like there are no other changes, so I think the request for staff is to provide an updated rules of procedure with the language from the state code that we've been referencing added to 5.2 as another sentence, a second sentence to 5.2, which is the appeals section, and then also to 5D as in Delta, which is the tie vote section, and it would just be tacked on, not in place of any of the current language. Did I get that right? Seeing nods, I'll keep moving. We have readopt the current rules of procedure. I don't think we need to do that unless somebody tells me we need to readopt. I think the current rules are still in force and that we can move on to our next agenda item, which is reviewing and adopting
So we'll adopt it.
next
with the
meeting.
change At the next meeting.
Correct.
All right, that's what you're saying. You're gonna adopt it at the next meeting.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, we
All
will
right.
vote on it next meeting.
That makes sense.
It all written down.
And then, so 3C, review and adopt the 2025 meeting schedule. This is on our meeting packet page. I'll find it in a second.
Is there some reason we did March 3rd to March 31st
14.
and not an
Packet
April
page
date?
14.
Page 14.
Thank you. Ms. Joseph, March, what is your, the
It
column on
goes
the
from-
far right hand is our
Yeah.
meeting date.
Goes from, no, that's the deadline filing, never mind.
Our
Should be
meeting date is in the far
meeting
right
date.
column. I
Okay,
think it's
got it.
generally just the first Tuesday of every month,
You can take submissions anytime you
except
want.
for the one in bold, which is a Wednesday, November,
Is there-
for elections.
July is usually a holiday week. Is there any consideration there?
What is a holiday week?
July 1 is that first meeting of
Uh-huh.
that holiday week. Is there consideration there that anyone would like to make?
Tuesday.
That become a holiday week.
Thought that was a day.
Well, could have people on vacation that week. That's what
It's,
I'm just
you
thinking.
know, it's a good,
People
What
go.
about Christmas? I mean, Columbus Day, you know?
so
We-
we would be scheduled to meet on the first, which is Tuesday, and then Friday is July 4th. So I don't have a problem with that personally. I don't know if anybody else does.
Just trying to see if heading
Sure.
it off before we may know what everybody's holiday schedule might be like.
Great.
So if you're
Well,
fine with it, that's fine.
I will confess that I've been in touch with staff about 2 conflicts that if we do end up having meetings on these dates, that I will need to be either remote participating or not participating. Those are on April 1st and August 5th. I think having, good head start on trying to work around those, we should be fine in terms of communicating to potential appellants, the roster of the potential board those days, and certainly our vice chair would be fully capable of stepping in my absence. So I would propose that we don't change those meeting dates, so we just have them if we have an item, and I'll either participate remotely or not participate.
I think, Freedom of Information Act, I just went through this in another board that I'm on. The the meeting, at least in the State Human Rights Committee, cannot be run remotely. So you could participate remotely, but
That's right.
the vice chair would have to run the meeting in person.
Yeah, I think our rules of procedure have a pretty clear prescription for this, actually, which I was pleasantly, not say surprised, I was pleased to find. I think it's all already scripted for us.
Could be the same rules, same words. exactly.
Yeah, the remote participation starts in 7. And 7.3 is when a chair requests to participate. Thank you. We'll just see what we have on our potential agenda on those dates and move forward accordingly, if y'all are okay with that.
We're good. Hope you have a good time.
Great. So I think we need to go ahead and adopt that meeting schedule. Do I have a motion?
I move we adopt the meeting schedule for this year, 2025.
I'll second.
Hearing a motion and a second to adopt the 2025 meeting schedule as included in our packet, page 14. Ms. Alley, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Shepherd,
Aye.
Ms. Joseph,
Aye.
Mr. Burkhart,
Aye.
Mr. Carrington.
Aye. All right, we can move on to the approval of minutes, number 5 on our agenda. And these minutes start on packet page 50. If anybody has any changes they'd like to make, please speak up now.
Oh, wait, I have one for the people present on page 1, Richie Deloria.
Good catch, Mr. Shepherd. Thank you. Any other changes y'all would like to make? All right. Hearing no more changes, do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from December 3rd, 2024 with the addition that Mr. Shepherd just made, which is adding Mr. Deloria to item number 2.
He's already on there, isn't he? Richard Deloria?
He's up at the top of the page, but
Just
he's not
also-
listed under
yeah,
the
also
also present.
Just seems like this, all the other staff is, Andy Herrick is mentioned, James Bowling, lots of staff.
Oh, where it says also present. Oh, I see
Richard
where you
wasn't
are.
there.
Okay.
It may simply not be included because they didn't state his name.
Okay, so this is in addition to line 32 or 33 of the draft minutes from December 3rd, 2024. Do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes December 3rd, 2024 with the addition of Richie Deloria's name on page 1.
Is there a second?
Second.
Hearing a motion and a second, Ms. Alley, would you please call the roll for the approval of minutes with Mr. Shepherd's change from December 3rd, 2024?
Mr. Burkhart,
Aye.
Ms. Joseph,
Abstain.
Mr. Shepherd,
Aye.
Mr. Carrington.
Aye. All right, we can move to old business now. We don't have anything on our agenda for old business. Does any board member have an old business item?
Yeah, I do. It'll be quick.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph. Go ahead.
I had sent everybody an email saying that I was not going to ask to be re-upped because my term ends in May. And because the Board of Supervisors did not act on the letter or apparently even read the letter, I thought by this time we would have had something in place. So we don't have anything in place. So I will ask to be re-upped for another 5 years. So I'm not leaving. I will keep making inappropriate comments. So anyway, so I just wanted you all to know, and I'll send out another email. So it's something in writing that's saying I rescind whatever it was that I had said before. You're not looking too pleased.
Thank
there,
you, Ms.
Robert.
Joseph. We're glad to hear that old business item. Is there any other old business that we need to take care of right now?
Yeah. Oh, please.
Yeah, I don't know what the process is. I think we've turned that over to the court already for a replacement. So how that all pans out, I'll let you know. Put it that way.
Say that again. So the board did approve it and you have,
Turned it over to the
So
court.
we have,
I alerted them. on
Ms.
the
Joseph, are you
vacancy.
talking about the alternate?
yes.
So Ms. Joseph is talking about the alternate. I think Mr. Spota is
I'm
talking about the
your
process to replace.
process
You
to,
turned me over to the court saying
Yeah.
she's not coming back.
Yes.
Oh.
yeah, so we'll have to look into whatever that procedure is to undo that. Or, well, actually, we'll look into
Or
both,
amend
but
it.
we'll look into both things.
Yeah.
How's that?
Okay.
Well, Ms. Joseph, we obviously would love to have you
More of
again.
a heads up.
Just let me know what happens,
Yes,
whether
ma'am.
I need to show up. or
Yes,
not.
ma'am.
Okay, interesting.
You might have to apply again.
I don't think so.
Their name in the hat.
Mr. Burkhart, do you have another old business item?
Yes, I've got a couple of items and I'll try to keep them. I'm not going to read everything. I'm sure everybody's quite pleased with that. But since June 6th of 2023, and I've referenced this before when we had 4 members of the BZA in attendance and a 2-2 vote affirming the zoning administrator's decision. We've had 7 meetings since that time, and 6 of which we've talked about BZA alternates. There's all kinds of discussion with each one of these as to what occurred. But again, I want to go back and reference because we were led to believe that the supervisors had a letter that was sitting on sort of the back burner regarding our request for an alternate. And again, the surprise one of the supervisors had when I mentioned that gave obviously piqued my interest, and I'm sure everybody else is on this board because we have been working for almost 18 months to bring this to a resolution. And it brings me to my second point as far as the budget, and this is interconnected. In the December meeting, when we approved a motion for $1,000 within the budget for legal counsel, we had asked, and Mr. Shepherd specifically said he wanted to get ahead of the process and they wanted to somehow be involved in the budget process, or at least something in the process before it went to the Board of Supervisors. But February 26th, we've got a county executive's draft budget before the board. I've looked in the agendas. We've got February 12th and the 19th. We've got a work session, our AC 44 on the 12th, regular meeting, but no agenda yet posted on the 19th. I'm just kind of wondering where in this, because we won't be meeting until March 4th next time. So where in the budget process will we be able to participate, and what language has been provided to fund that extra staff position, meaning the alternate, in the amount attached? Because I think that was Mr. Shepherd's concern, as it was, I think, with others on the board as well, about making sure that we were there in advance, had heads up, had some input into the budget. So again, 2 questions. Where are we with the budget? And what's the narrative that will be accompanying that budget? And what's the update on where that letter is right now? And has it been circulated? Do you know that supervisors have read it?
As one minor update, Ms. Joseph, when you were chair, this is your effort that you kicked off, which is a good circle back to Mr. Burkhart's point about how long we've been discussing it. We did send a letter when I was chair last year. I don't know exactly when I signed it, but I know that we asked if it was received, and we got confirmation of receipt. It was sent through email. And we got confirmation of receipt, but it sounds like maybe not all of the board members received it, or at least they don't remember it. So
Correct.
I don't know if staff has any more color or context on that, but we as a board might need to think about if there's anything more we can do. I don't know anything off the cuff that we could do to try and
Well, I
be
have
the squeaky wheel, but
Well, I have a suggestion. On March 26th. The chair could certainly go before the board during public comment and introduce who you are and what the BZA is about and the critical need to be able to have 5 seated board members at each one of these meetings.
Yeah, we had talked about that, but thought that perhaps they would read the letter. And they did receive it. That's the other thing, because I think it was a while ago that you signed the letter and it went out, months and months and months ago. I looked it up, but I hesitate telling you what month I think it was.
Well, I'm happy to look back, but I guess I'm happy to carry the flag if that's the way this board feels we should act toward just making a public comment as the chair. Ms. Joseph, you certainly were the one that kicked this effort off, and I think all of us agree with it. We did, and we still do. I don't know that I don't feel as passionately about it, the issue as you, because I think that the quorum of 3 and the potential for a tie vote, while it's not ideal, of course, it has remedies baked into it. So I will say I'm not maybe as passionate about it, but I certainly agree that it should happen. And I think we, estimated the cost at $500 a year or something. It was not a tremendous cost. So I'm happy to be the one to go to the board in public comment or otherwise on our behalf, if that's what we think we should do.
Well, either that or we double team, because you and I did the research. We actually talked to other BZA, their comments.
I just want to
So,
make sure you get heard.
I
Yep.
mean, I think that Kurt and I could answer questions because we did the research. So, if that isn't usurping your power, I would be happy.
No,
to-
and if you think it would carry some sort of different weight coming from me, then I'm happy to join in on the effort or go solo. It doesn't, we can discuss that, but
Okay, well, let's talk about it, because I just think that they need to know that this just wasn't something that popped into somebody's head, is that we really did have discussions on it for several sessions and did.
did some homework and
did some
research. Yeah,
homework
absolutely.
And asked questions that the whole BZA thought were important, pertinent questions to ask other BZAs in the state, so.
Mr. Shepherd.
A small point, the thing about, that I said about getting ahead of the budget system, I think that was in the context of Mr. Bowling's compensation, which is separate from the
Any additional costs?
additional cost for the alternate.
Right. You're absolutely correct.
So that might be like 2 lines on the budget, not just one.
How do y'all feel about moving on to new business? We have budget discussion there. Is that okay?
Yep.
All right, let's move on to the budget discussion. And I understand from conversations with staff that the request has been made, but Mr. Svoboda, do you want to give us a reminder of what the schedule is like and what the ask has been? Or would you be willing to?
Well,
if you don't want
I'll do
to.
my best. So the board is just beginning those discussions. I know the final budget, I think, is April 23rd. I can email out a schedule to everybody with that. We've been told as departments to toe the line, no increases. So that's where we are, as far as any budget proposals for staffing or additional needs. And so that was our start, was a zero-based budget guidance from finance. So we were charged with no increases in our proposal.
So with that charge in mind, the request was still conveyed or communicated somehow in violation of towing the line?
So that is submitted through our community development director and kind of ferreted out from there through finance. I can't speak to more than that. I can ask someone,
Okay.
for some follow-up, from budget division on how those requests are considered or different things. So one of the things that we would look at is the amount of money we may have had left in our budget from this year to next year. And if we carried over the same amount, would it cover that particular individual, let's say an additional member? So theoretically, if we're paying that member to be here to listen, again, we haven't adopted all of those procedures, but there's two ways, say a substitute member would participate, is they would be here and get paid, or where they would not be here unless they were needed. And then there's no budget impact because they're getting the salary of the person who's not here, right? Doesn't help with some training and some other things. So there's some things to be worked out there if that request is granted. So
Okay.
depending on how we have to work with the budget, there's different ways to kind of get to where we want to go if we get approval for that additional part-time person.
I just have to think that if the department was behind it, it would be perhaps possible to make a small adjustment within the gigantic budget to find $1,000.
Yeah,
That's
we
just
are,
an opinion.
yeah, there's other $1,000 things competing, including our new training for our new EP&L and some other things that we have going on. So the budget is really tight. I don't know how to deliver bad news good, but that's just the reality. So there's a bunch of things up there, and part of that is, we look at it divisionally, we look at it departmentally, and then we look at it organizationally and how that serves. And so depending on your lenses, it may serve the additional member, or the 1,000 towards the BZA may serve the organization better, or the 1,000, let's say, for EPL might serve better. I don't know. That's not my bailiwick to make that call.
I appreciate that. I guess if there's anything I could communicate to staff would be that
Okay.
I would love to look at changes we could make to save money elsewhere, because I think the alternative is that Mr. Bowling works for free,
Right.
which we don't want to ask him to do,
No
or
budget impact there.
or the BZA goes without counsel, which we don't really want to
Right.
do either. So,
Understood. Yeah, as far as I know, there's no cuts. That being said, there's no cuts on the amount that we have right now. So that's kind of where we are.
All
We
right.
can look at our past meeting history and see if we can do some projections moving forward. But it's, as you know, it's sporadic.
Right.
Sometimes we meet
Yeah, it's hard
every
to-
month, and then sometimes not. So,
Okay. Thank you.
Yes,
Thanks for doing it off the cuff, especially. Upcoming meeting information, maybe you don't want to leave the mic, or Miss Alec or Mr. McCall. Can y'all give us a sense of what we may have coming down in terms of next meetings?
There have been appeals filed, but nothing scheduled yet. So, and those appeals, I believe, are in the process of potentially being withdrawn. So more to come. Well, we can give you an update on whether they've been withdrawn officially by the appellant or not. Next meeting that we have.
Okay. Thank
Because
you.
if we were to schedule it, it's not going to be the March meeting. It would be later beyond that.
So the assumption right now is that there will be no March meeting.
I believe so.
We won't hold you to it, but that's helpful. Thank you.
I mean, there are no other applications that we filed, variances or special use permits that apply, but yeah, we'll keep you posted. on
Okay. All right. Thank you. We've come to the end of our agenda.
We asked just one more question about the gun appeal. Do we know where that is in the courts at this point?
I do not.
Mr. Herrick, do you know?
It's pending before the court right now, and the appellant has not yet requested a court date, so it's pending.
Okay, thank you.
I one other question. The case we heard in December, is there any update as far as what may have happened, as far as any actions that followed? Are they in compliance?
Remind me which case that was.
The educational chicken coop.
The Costalac.
I don't know. the latest-
Yes, Mr. Kostelak has filed an appeal.
Okay.
He has filed an appeal?
That's correct. So an appeal has been filed with the circuit court.
Okay, thank you. Well, there you have it.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Do I have a second?
Second,
Motion to adjourn in a second. Ms. Alley, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Burkhart?
Aye.
Ms. Joseph?
aye.
Mr. Shepherd?
Aye.
Mr. Carrington?
Aye. Motion to adjourn passes 4-0 at 4:04. We are adjourned.